the hidden failures that no one talks about after 50. Welcome, my friend. If you're over 50, then you already know life doesn't always go the way we imagined. We grow up believing that success is a clear destination, a steady job, a loving family, a little savings, maybe a home of our own. But what if I told you that some of life's most painful failures don't come from losing money or missing out on fame? They come quietly, wrapped in silence and habit. They show up not as a crisis but as a slow erosion of who we once were. And most people don't talk about them until it's too late. Today, I want to speak to the part of you that has weathered storms, the part that knows what it's like to give your all and still feel empty at times. I want to help you name the hidden kinds of failure that sneak in after 50, so you can free yourself from them and start living the rest of your life with clarity, courage, and peace. Because if there's one thing I've learned after decades of working with older adults, it's this. What breaks a person isn't always the big events. Sometimes, it's the daily weight of regret, the silence between loved ones, the feeling that your best days are behind you. But they are not. In this video, we'll walk through 6 emotional truths, 6 hidden failures that often steal the joy from people over 50 without them even realizing it. But this won't be a video about shame. It's a conversation about freedom. Because once we recognize what's been quietly pulling us down, we can rise stronger, wiser, and more connected to what truly matters. So I invite you, I urge you to stay with me until the very end. Because the message you most need to hear might be in the last 5 minutes. And if this speaks to your heart in any way, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. This is a space for reflection, truth, healing, and renewal, especially for those of us who've already walked half the journey. Now, let's begin. 1. When the mind becomes a prison, the silent pain of a closed heart. There is something few people warn you about when you grow older. It isn't the gray hair. It isn't the sore knees. It's not even the wrinkles that slowly appear in the mirror. It's what happens inside you. It's the tightening of the heart, the shrinking of the mind, the quiet hardening of your emotional world. When you were younger, your spirit was open to the world. You could laugh without shame, cry without apology, fall and rise again with the confidence that tomorrow would still be waiting for you. But with time, many of us start to build emotional walls. Not out of malice, but out of protection. And before we know it, we are living in a house we can no longer leave, a house built by fear, regret, disappointment, and self-judgment. This, my friend, is the first kind of failure that steals life from people after 50. The failure to remain open. You see, the world doesn't just change around us. It also changes inside us. When people hurt us, when dreams fall apart, when relationships break without repair, we start to close off. We stop trusting. We stop expressing. We even stop hoping, because hoping has become too risky. I once worked with a woman named Margaret. She was 67, had 2 grown children, and was widowed for 10 years. She came to one of my workshops wearing a warm smile and a neat blouse. She looked like someone who had it all together. But by the second day, something cracked. In a moment of silence, she whispered, "I haven't really laughed in years. Not a deep, belly laugh. I'm scared to feel too much, because I don't know if I can handle losing anything else." That was her truth. And it's the truth of many older adults I've met. Somewhere along the way, we start to believe that feeling too much is dangerous. So we start to feel nothing at all. We become polite, pleasant, numb. But the price of emotional safety is aliveness. And that price is too high. A hardened heart might protect you from pain, but it also shuts out joy. It shields you from betrayal, but it also blocks intimacy. It keeps you safe from failure, but it also denies you the chance to live fully. Psychologists call this emotional withdrawal a coping mechanism often found in adults who've experienced multiple life disappointments without resolution. And the longer it continues, the more likely it becomes a way of life. So what can we do? We begin by naming it. Not with shame, not with judgment, but with compassion. Ask yourself gently, when was the last time you allowed yourself to be vulnerable? When was the last time you shared how you really felt, without censoring it? When did you last let someone comfort you, not out of pity, but out of love? If it's been a long time, you're not alone. Many people over 50 were raised to be strong, self-sufficient, emotionally reserved. Tears were a sign of weakness. Anger was repressed. Joy was conditional. And with those old lessons, We were never taught how to process pain in a healthy way. But here's the truth. Emotional honesty is not weakness. It's maturity. It takes a stronger person to say I'm hurting than to pretend everything is fine. And healing doesn't come from pretending you're above pain. It comes from making peace with it so it no longer controls you. That's what I told Margaret. We worked together for several months. She began journaling every morning. She reconnected with an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. She even adopted a rescue dog, a little brown mutt named Toby, who reminded her that love, when given freely, always returns in some form. One day she walked into my office, glowing, and said, "I didn't realize how frozen I had become, until I finally felt warm again." You see, the first emotional message I want you to take to heart is this. Do not let pain from the past become a wall between you and life. Because here's what no one tells you. You can start over emotionally, no matter your age. You can begin again not by forgetting the past, but by choosing not to live inside it. You deserve laughter that rises from the belly. You deserve hugs that linger just a little longer. You deserve to feel deeply, fully, without apology. So if you've caught yourself saying things like "I'm fine," when you're not, pause. If you've stopped expecting joy, start again. If you've closed yourself off to people because it's safer that way, ask yourself, safer, but at what cost? Because the cost of emotional silence is too high for a soul as rich as yours. You've come this far. You've overcome so much. Don't let the fear of feeling rob you of the years ahead. In the second message, we'll talk about something even more delicate, the pain of giving everything to your children, only to feel like you failed. If that touches a part of your story, stay with me, because what you'll hear next might finally bring you peace. And if this first message spoke to something quiet in you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and continue the journey with me. You are not alone. And you don't have to pretend anymore. Your healing starts here. 2. When love feels like failure, the heartache of watching your children struggle. There is no bond more sacred, more enduring, or more deeply felt than the love between a parent and a child. It begins before they are even born, the flutter of hope, the silent promises we whisper to ourselves. I will protect you. I will give you a better life. And for many of us, that promise becomes the compass of our entire existence. We give them our youth, our energy, our sleepless nights. We give them the last piece of meat at dinner, the better side of the blanket, the savings we were never able to spend on ourselves. We build our world around their needs, and we do it not out of duty, but out of love. But what happens when all that love doesn't lead to the outcome we hoped for? What happens when your child, your everything, grows into an adult who is distant, or lost, or unkind? That, my friend, is a kind of grief that few people talk about. Because to admit it feels like betrayal. It feels like failure. I once sat with a man named Ronald, 72 years old, a retired mechanic from Ohio. His hands were worn from decades of work, but his voice trembled like a boy's. I raised him the best I could, he said, speaking of his only son. I taught him to be honest. I stayed with his mother even when I was miserable because I wanted him to have a stable home. I put him through college. But now, he barely speaks to me. He says I wasn't there emotionally. I don't even know what that means. And in that moment, I saw the pain of millions of parents etched in one man's face, the deep ache of loving someone who doesn't understand the price you paid to love them. Here's the quiet truth. Good parenting doesn't guarantee perfect children. Because children are not clay we can mold. They are souls on their own journey, shaped by choices we cannot make for them, wounds we cannot always prevent, and perspectives we may never fully understand. Sometimes they fail to thrive, not because we didn't care, but because they couldn't receive what we offered in the way we gave it. Sometimes they rebel, not because they hate us, but because they are trying clumsily to find themselves. Sometimes they drift away, not because they stop loving us, but because they don't yet know how to love in return. But none of that makes you a failure. In fact, I believe that if you loved deeply, sacrificed honestly, and did your best with the tools you had, then you succeeded. Parenting is not a guarantee. It's a leap of faith. And every generation walks through fire in its own way. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't reflect. Sometimes, we made mistakes. We were too strict, too soft, too distracted, too afraid. Sometimes we parented from survival, not wisdom. And when we look back, we wish we had known more. But regret is not the end of the story. It's just an invitation to reconnect, to repair, to love again in a new way. I often tell my clients, it's never too late to be a better parent if you're willing to be a more honest one. What does that mean? It means reaching out, even when you're hurt. It means listening, even when you disagree. It means saying, I may not understand everything you feel, but I'm still here. It means letting go of your version of who they should be, so you can love the version they are. And it also means forgiving yourself for the times you couldn't be perfect. Because the truth is, no child is raised by a flawless parent. We all did the best we could with the wisdom we had at the time. I remember a woman named Eloise who came to one of my lectures on aging and emotional healing. She stood up in tears and said, my daughter says I was too harsh, that I never let her express herself, but I was just trying to make her strong. I didn't want her to be taken advantage of like I was. And there it was, not cruelty, but fear. Not failure, but love expressed through the lens of trauma. When I spoke to her daughter weeks later, I asked, do you believe your mother loved you? She answered softly, yes. I just wish she could have shown it differently. Sometimes the bridge between parent and child isn't broken, it's just unfinished. And someone has to take the first step. So here's my gentle invitation. If you have a child who has drifted, write them a letter. Not to fix everything, but to open the door. If you have a child who is struggling, remind them that your love is not dependent on their success. If you have a child who no longer speaks to you, pray for them, bless them, and let go of the guilt that is eating you alive. Because parenting doesn't end when they turn 18. And neither does grace. You see, the real failure is not in having a child who struggles. It's in letting that struggle define your worth. You are still a person. You are still whole. You are still capable of joy, even if your family is fractured. So take a deep breath. Let the ache soften. Let the past become a teacher, not a sentence. And if you're lucky enough to have a child who still holds your hand, cherish it. Let go of perfection. Show up with presence. Because in the end, your child doesn't need you to be flawless. They need you to be real. In our next message, we'll talk about a different kind of sorrow, the feeling of running out of time to make something of yourself. If you've ever looked back and wondered, did I waste my life? You won't want to miss what comes next. And as always, if this message touched your heart, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's grow together, one truth at a time. 3. The career that never happened. Making peace with unfulfilled dreams. There comes a time in life when we stop asking, what do I want to be when I grow up? And start wondering, is this it? For many people over 50, this quiet question begins to stir in the early hours of the morning. It arrives between sips of coffee, in the stillness of retirement, or in the silence left behind when the last child moves out. It's a question that doesn't scream, but it lingers. Did I do enough? Did I become who I was meant to be? Was all this worth it? And for some, the answer isn't satisfying. You see, not every life follows a grand arc. Not every career leads to legacy. Not every talent gets discovered. And not every dream becomes a destination. Some people spent decades in jobs they didn't love because they needed to put food on the table. Some gave up their ambitions to raise children, to care for a sick parent, to follow a spouse across the country. Some tried and failed, again and again, until they lost the will to try again. And now, with more years behind than ahead, they're left holding an ache they don't know how to name. The ache of the life that could have been. I once met a man named Carl. He was 63, divorced, and had worked at the same factory for 41 years. He came to one of my seminars not for the topic, but because, as he said, there was nothing on TV. He sat in the back, arms crossed, until I said one sentence that made him lean forward. Sometimes, the grief we carry is not for who we lost, but for the version of ourselves that never had a chance to live. Afterward, he came up to me and said quietly, I wanted to be a teacher. Not just wanted was meant to be. But my dad died when I was 17. My mom needed help. And that was that. There was no bitterness in his voice, only quiet sorrow. Carl isn't alone. I've spoken with countless adults, nurses who wanted to write novels, accountants who dreamed of painting, stay-at-home parents who once imagined becoming psychologists, musicians, entrepreneurs, dancers, architects. So much creativity, passion, and purpose, tucked away in the name of responsibility. And make no mistake, those sacrifices were noble. But that doesn't mean they were painless. Here's the truth no one wants to admit. You can be proud of your life and still mourn the path you never took. This is not ingratitude. This is humanity. Because every fulfilled role often comes at the cost of another. And every choice, even the right one, means leaving something else behind. But here's the part we forget. It's never too late to honor the dream. Even if you can't live it the way you once imagined. Maybe you'll never be the full-time artist who exhibits in Paris, but you can take a local watercolor class and fill your home with your own joy. Maybe you won't write the next bestseller, but you can start that memoir and let your grandchildren know who you really were. Maybe you'll never be a public speaker, but you can mentor a young person and pass on your wisdom one conversation at a time. Your dream doesn't have to be big to be real. It only needs to be honest. Because the tragedy is not in having dreams that change. The tragedy is in believing that they're no longer worth pursuing just because you've grown older. I once worked with a woman named Teresa, 71 years old. She had spent her entire adult life as a caregiver, first for her children, then her husband, and finally her aging mother. She came to me saying, "I've never done anything for me." We began to explore what doing something for her might look like. It didn't have to be dramatic. She had always loved baking but never thought it counted as a real skill. I encouraged her to bake every Saturday and give her creations to neighbors. Before long, she started a small side business, nothing grand, just joy-filled. She called it Second Rise. Not a second chance. A second rise. That's what I want for you. Maybe you're not starting over, but you can still start again. And maybe the career you once wanted isn't possible now. But the part of your soul that wanted to create, to teach, to serve, to inspire, that part is still alive. It's just waiting for permission. So give yourself that permission. Write the first page. Take the first class. Record the first video. Plant the first seed. Ask the first question. Not for a paycheck. Not for a prize. But for the quiet peace of knowing you honored what was buried too long. Because here's the beautiful truth. Your legacy isn't limited to your resume. It's found in the courage to become yourself no matter when that journey begins. If no one else has told you this yet, let me be the first. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not done. In the next message, we'll shift to something deeper still. The loneliness that creeps in not because you're alone, but because you've lost your emotional anchor. If you've ever wondered why the quiet in your home sometimes feels heavier than it should, I hope you'll stay. And if this message stirred something inside you, please subscribe to the channel. Share your story in the comments. Let someone else know they're not alone. Your voice matters. Your dream still breathes. And this community is here to walk with you one message at a time. 4. The loneliness behind the smile. Why emotional connection matters more than ever after 50. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It's not about empty houses or quiet dinners. It's not about sleeping in a bed by yourself or going days without seeing someone. No, this loneliness is deeper, quieter, harder to name. It's the kind of loneliness that lives inside connection when you're surrounded by people, but no one really sees you anymore. When conversations stay shallow. When no one asks how you're really doing. When you smile out of habit, not happiness. And this, I've found, is one of the most painful experiences people face after 50. Not because they're weak. Not because they're unlovable. But because somewhere along the way, they stopped being truly known. You see, the world teaches us to value strength, to endure, to carry on without complaint. And as we age, we learn to put our pain aside for the sake of others. We become the listeners, the fixers, the steady ones. But the cost of always being strong is that we forget how to be held. I once met a woman named June, 74, who had been married for 51 years. She had children, grandchildren, and a circle of friends. And yet, she told me something I'll never forget. I haven't had a real conversation in 10 years. People talk to me but they don't see me. Not really. And I believed her. Because emotional isolation isn't about numbers. It's about depth. And when the world only relates to you as mom, or grandma, or retiree, or widow, it becomes easier and easier to forget that you're still you. The woman who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen. The man who once dreamed of traveling to Montana. The person with unspoken fears, desires, stories no one ever asked to hear. This erosion of identity, this slow, invisible slipping away, is one of the greatest emotional dangers of later life. And it doesn't just hurt your heart. It impacts your body. Studies from Harvard and Stanford have shown that emotional isolation increases the risk of cognitive decline, depression, cardiovascular issues, and even early mortality. In fact, loneliness has been found to be as harmful to long-term health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Think about that. We treat smoking with urgency. But what about the ache that comes from not being understood? So what's the solution? Emotional connection. Real connection. Not just being around people, but letting someone back in. Letting your walls down even just a little. This isn't easy, especially if you've been hurt. Many older adults have experienced betrayal, the loss of a spouse, the fading of friendships, the distancing of grown children who are too busy to call. And in response, we protect ourselves. We say, "I'm fine." We keep it light. We don't want to be a burden. But here's the truth. You deserve to be known. Not just for what you've done, but for who you are. So let me offer you 3 gentle invitations to begin that reconnect on. First, reach out honestly. Not with small talk, but with truth. Call someone you trust and say, "I've been feeling a bit distant lately. Can we talk?" You'd be surprised how many people are feeling the same way and waiting for someone to go first. Second, create space for new bonds. Join a group not for distraction, but for presence. Whether it's a walking club, a community class, or a book circle, these are spaces where new conversations and sometimes new friendships can begin. Third, practice emotional expression. Start a journal. Not about your tasks, but about your thoughts, your memories, your longings, your regrets. Let yourself be real on the page. This practice alone can ease the burden of loneliness by reconnecting you with yourself. Because here's the healing truth. You are still someone worth knowing. You are still someone worth loving. You are still someone who can feel deeply, laugh fully, cry openly, and still be safe. The smile you wear for others may fool them. But don't let it fool you. Don't settle for being visible, but unseen. Heard, but not understood. Because this world doesn't just need your wisdom. It needs your aliveness, your spark, your stories, your tears. And you don't have to wait for someone to notice. You can start by choosing one person to let in. Just one. And say, "I miss feeling connected. Can we talk?" It might be the beginning of everything. In our next message, we'll face something even more personal. The quiet crisis that creeps in when your body begins to change, your confidence begins to waver, and you start to wonder, am I still relevant? We'll explore how to face that fear and how to reclaim a sense of strength, beauty, and dignity in a world that too often forgets the power of growing older. And if this message made you pause even for a moment, I gently invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, or share this video with someone who may need it. Because healing doesn't always happen in solitude. Sometimes, it begins with the courage to say, "Me too." 5. When the body changes, finding strength in a new kind of power. There's a moment most of us remember when the body no longer moves the way it used to. It might be a missed step, a forgotten word, the mirror showing a face we don't quite recognize. Or maybe it's the sound of your breath after a flight of stairs that once meant nothing. And suddenly, without warning, you realize your body is changing. You've always known aging would come, but no one told you how personal it would feel. How strange it would be to wake up in a body that feels unfamiliar. How difficult it would be to watch your strength, energy, or memory slip little by little like sand through your fingers. This isn't just about health. It's about identity. Because for most of your life, your body was your foundation. You worked with your hands. You walked with confidence. You relied on your stamina to get through long days. You looked a certain way, moved a certain way, felt a certain way. And when that changes, it can feel like you are disappearing, too. I've spoken with countless older adults who quietly confess, "I don't feel attractive anymore. I hate that I need help with simple things. I miss the way I used to feel, alive." And behind those words is something even deeper, a fear of becoming invisible. In a culture that worships youth, we are not taught how to honor the body as it ages. We are taught to chase wrinkle creams, hide the gray, push through the fatigue. We are told that slowing down is failure, that needing rest is weakness. But none of that is true. Your body is not your worth. Your changing pace is not your shame. And your aging skin, your aching joints, your softer shape, these are not flaws. They are the living proof of every storm you've walked through, every burden you've carried, every year you've survived. Let me tell you about Robert. He was 68 when I met him. Once a high school athlete, he'd spent his life as a firefighter, strong, reliable, unshakable. But after a knee replacement and a slow recovery, he began withdrawing. His wife told me, he won't look at himself in the mirror. He thinks he's broken. We began talking. What came out wasn't about his knee. It was about his identity. He said, I don't know who I am if I'm not strong. If I can't protect, provide, carry things, what use am I? That question sits heavy on many shoulders. If I'm not who I used to be, then who am I now? Here's the truth I shared with Robert and now with you. You may not be able to lift what you once could, but you carry something far more powerful now: wisdom. You carry patience, resilience, discernment. You've learned how to listen before reacting, how to rest without guilt, how to speak truth even when your voice trembles. You've lived through grief, disappointment, and change, and you're still here. That is strength. That is power. But it takes a shift in mindset to recognize it. You don't have to compete with your younger self. You don't have to prove your worth with speed, beauty, or productivity. You are allowed to age. In fact, aging is not a decline, it's a deepening. It's the season where the fruit ripens, where the roots grow deeper, where presence, not performance, becomes the gift you offer the world. So what can you do when your body begins to feel unfamiliar? First, honor it. Not with resentment but with reverence. Your body has carried you through every chapter. It has never abandoned you. Even now, it's trying its best. Second, care for it with gentleness. Not out of vanity, but out of respect. Eat to nourish. Move to stay mobile. Sleep to restore. Not because you're chasing youth, but because you're honoring life. Third, shift the spotlight. Instead of focusing on what's lost, focus on what's gained. The freedom to say no. The clarity to know what matters. The confidence to live without apology. And finally, surround yourself with people who see you not just your age, your appearance, or your limitations. You deserve to be seen, not as the old one or the fragile one, but as the wise, layered, beautifully complex person you've become. Robert eventually joined a local community garden. It was hard on his knees, yes, but it gave him purpose. He told me, I may not carry ladders anymore, but I help grow life. And that means something. Yes, it does. So let me say this to you, clearly and without hesitation. You are still valuable. You are still beautiful. You are still needed. The shape of your strength has changed, but your strength is still very much alive. In our final message, we'll explore how to take everything we faced, every loss, every disappointment, every unanswered question, and turn it into something sacred, a life of peace, presence, and purpose in the years ahead. If this message resonated with your journey, I invite you gently to subscribe, comment, and share your thoughts. Your story matters. Your body may change, but your voice is still powerful. Let's walk this path together with compassion, courage, and grace. 6. When peace becomes the goal, embracing the rest of your life with grace. After everything you've been through, the heartbreaks and healing, the joys and disappointments, the things that worked out and the things that didn't, there comes a moment when a quiet shift begins. You stop chasing. You stop proving. You stop needing life to look a certain way. And for the first time in a long time, you begin to ask, what if peace is the real success? What if the most meaningful chapter of my life is not about what I accomplish but about how I live, how I love, and how I let go? This message is for those who've carried too much for too long. For the parents who gave everything and still wonder if it was enough. For the dreamers who never quite reached their mountaintop. For the strong ones who've grown tired of being strong. For those whose lives look nothing like the plan and yet are still full of breath, of beauty, of quiet, sacred worth. You see, after 50, something strange begins to happen. The world grows quieter, and your soul grows louder. And if you listen carefully, it will tell you what it really wants. Not applause. Not perfection. Not more stuff. Just presence. Clarity. A little more laughter. And finally permission to rest. Not the kind of rest that means doing nothing, but the kind of rest that comes when you stop fighting yourself. When you make peace with your past. When you release the people who couldn't love you the way you needed. When you forgive yourself for not knowing then what you understand now. It's a different kind of power. Not loud, not flashy, but deep, steady, unshakable. I remember speaking with a woman named Clara, 79 years old. She'd been through a difficult marriage, raised 3 children, and outlived 2 siblings. When I asked her what gave her peace at this stage of life, she answered, "I stopped wishing people had treated me better. I stopped wondering why life didn't go the way I hoped. I started waking up grateful just to be here." That was the turning point. And maybe that's the wisdom we are meant to reach, not just why things happened, but how we choose to live with them. Acceptance is not giving up. It's growing up. It's no longer needing to rewrite the past. It's choosing to write a peaceful ending. So what does that look like? It looks like presence. Choosing to slow down and savor the sunrise. The warmth of tea on your lips. The laughter of your grandchildren. The breeze on your skin as you walk in the evening light. It looks like boundaries. No longer allowing toxic conversations, guilt-driven obligations, or comparison to steal your joy. It looks like softness. Replacing judgment with grace. Letting yourself cry. Letting yourself laugh. Letting yourself be. It looks like letting go. Of control. Of outcomes. Of needing everyone to understand you. Of needing everyone to agree with you. It looks like loving yourself enough to say, "I have earned the right to rest, to enjoy, to simply exist without constantly striving." Because that is what this stage of life can offer if you allow it. And yes, you may still have regrets. We all do. But regrets lose their power when they are held gently, not punished fiercely. You may still grieve. But grief becomes holy when it teaches you how to love deeper with those who are still here. You may still be healing. But healing is not a destination, it's a way of living. I want you to remember this. Your story is not over. But this chapter is yours to write. And you get to choose its tone. Will it be rushed? Bittersweet? Bitter? Or will it be spacious? Honest? Kind? I hope it will be the latter. Because no matter what came before, you still deserve a life that feels like home, not a performance. A life that allows you to exhale. To forgive. To feel. A life where you are not defined by what you lack, but by what you offer: presence, wisdom, and a heart that is finally learning to rest without guilt. So let this be your invitation. To no longer chase the past. To no longer fear the future. To come back to yourself. Because peace, my friend, is not found in what you accomplish, it's found in how you return to your own heart. And that journey, it starts now. Thank you for walking through these 6 messages with me. If even one sentence touched something inside you, I invite you to take a small action. Leave a comment. Share this with someone you care about. Subscribe to the channel, not because you should, but because your journey deserves company. Let's keep growing together, one quiet truth at a time. And above all, be gentle with yourself. You've made it this far. That already makes you extraordinary. If you've stayed with me through all 6 emotional messages, I want to say something simple but deeply meant. Thank you. Not just for watching, not just for listening, but for allowing yourself to feel, to reflect, to remember. The truth is, these conversations aren't easy. They touch places we've kept quiet for years. They stir memories, regrets, hopes we thought were buried for good. But that's the power of midlife and beyond. You no longer need to run. You no longer need to pretend. Because everything you've lived has led you here. To this moment. To this gentle pause. To this possibility of peace. You've now walked through 6 quiet truths. A heart closed off from life can silently imprison you. A child's choices do not define your worth as a parent. An unfinished dream does not make your life a failure. Emotional connection is as vital as food and sleep. Aging does not diminish your value, it deepens your wisdom. And above all, peace is not the end of life's journey, it's the reward of having lived with honesty and courage. So here's my heartfelt invitation. If any part of this video resonated with you, I gently encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Not out of pressure, but because you deserve to be part of a space that honors you, supports you, and walks beside you as you continue writing the next chapter of your life. And if you feel moved, share this video with someone you care about. A sibling, a friend, a spouse. Because sometimes, The right words at the right time can change how someone sees their entire life. And finally, don't just watch. Speak. Leave a comment below. Tell me which message touched you most. Tell me what you're healing from. Tell me what you've learned after 50 that you wish you'd known sooner. Because this community isn't built on perfect answers. It's built on real stories, honest connection, shared wisdom, and you have so much to give. So once again, from the quiet place in my heart to yours, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up for yourself. And thank you for believing that it's never too late to feel whole again. Until next time, take care of your body, be kind to your heart, and trust deeply that the best of you is still unfolding. Please continue watching the other videos on this channel. Each one offers a reflection, a lesson, a quiet mirror to help you grow stronger, softer, and wiser. Wishing you peace, joy, and purpose for the road ahead. We'll meet again soon.